Okay, hi everyone. Welcome. I'm Suzanne del Gizzo. I'm the editor of the Hemingway Review, and I am so pleased to welcome you to Menage a Trois from Hadley to Pauline. Between 1925 and 1927, Hemingway moved from the bohemian innocence of his relationship with Hadley to the polished, ambitious world that he entered with Pauline. And the transformation reshaped both the man and the writer. And that's what we're here to talk about tonight. So, good evening. Tonight, we are going to dive into one of the most emotionally complex and creatively fertile periods in Ernest Hemingway's life, his transition from his first wife, Hadley Richardson, to his second, Pauline Pfeiffer. This moment in Paris brings together literary history, personal drama, artistic ambition, and of course, the endlessly fascinating question of how Hemingway's life informed his work. Our goal tonight is to approach these figures with empathy, with nuance, grounded in history, but open to fresh interpretation and maybe shifting allegiances, and of course, along the way, to have a little bit of fun. I am so pleased to be joined tonight by the three distinguished panelists, and I'll just move through them alphabetically. So, Lesley M.M. Blume, welcome. She is New York Times best-selling author of Everybody Behaves Badly, the true story behind Hemingway's masterpiece. There we go, that's it. The Sun Also Rises. Ruth Hawkins is author of Unbelievable Happiness and Final Sorrow. There we go. Everybody had their books ready. I love it. The Hemingway Pfeiffer Marriage, and founder and emeritus director of the Hemingway Pfeiffer Museum, which is associated with Arkansas State University. Welcome, Ruth. And last but certainly not least, and she doesn't have a book, but she'll have a clip later on. Please welcome Lynn Novick, co-director with Ken Burns of the PBS documentary series Hemingway. So welcome to you all. Before we get started, I thought I would just open us up by setting the stage. And this is the first question to everyone. If we were dropped into Hemingway's Paris in 1925, around the time we are now, maybe a month or two earlier, what would we see and feel in his relationship with Hadley Richardson?
I loved this period in their life together. And I mean, especially when they first arrived in Paris, and he's written such vivid description about the two of them coming as total newcomers. And it was not charming, warm Paris. It was cold. I remember him saying that everything looked slimy in the rain, and they were trying to find any kind of comforts together as they were discovering this new city together, little croissants or warm cafes with steamy windows. And it was just such a sense of camaraderie between the two of them, just really intimate camaraderie, which I really loved. And at that time when they first arrived, they seemed to really exult in each other's company, and he still seemed to really need her, and she was, had been his biggest encourager. So I think, that period of time compared to what we are about to talk about, was just really loving and intense and strange and poignant.
But it was also the brokest they'd ever been too,
Yeah, of
especially
course.
in 1925. One of the issues was that their Hadley's trust fund, which they had been living off of, was pretty much cut in half because she had entrusted the management to I think the husband of a friend, and who lost it. So they were really living hand to mouth and living the true life of the starving writer, starving artist.
Yeah, Ruth, I've obviously swallowed hook, line, and sinker Hemingway's, glamorizing of their poverty,
Yeah,
in my earlier retelling.
right.
Thank you. So, moving a little bit further into this, but deeper into Hadley's personality, perhaps. How did Hadley's personality and her background help Hemingway, Ernest Hemingway, become the writer, not just the man.
I mean, she was wildly encouraging from the beginning. I mean, you see correspondence between the two of them, and I mean, she really is the earliest cheerleader, and not just, you're great, but like you could really go all the way. And it's interesting that he took so much, that he placed so much in her encouragement because she's not a literary person. But he really seemed to need it and to thrive on it. And as Ruth mentioned, there was also financial considerations. It was a modest trust fund, but it still was significant. Hadley's nest egg enabled them to go to Paris, to go to Europe,
Mhm.
and begin his life. And so it was, I always think of Hadley a bit as like a comfort goat at the beginning. And but he really seemed, he at this point at least he was showing her his writing, the early writings, and she was giving feedback on it, and he seemed to really value it.
I think one of the things that really struck me was just in terms of how their relationship evolved, where they both were coming from in terms of their emotional lives and the sort of really challenging childhood or family experiences they had, and the probably mood disorders that were prevalent in both families, and having had to deal with death by suicide of parents, and how that connected them in such a profound way. Because I mean, I can only imagine, if you haven't been through it, no one else could understand you. And that bond was so deep at the time. Obviously, it didn't turn out to be a lifelong bond in the way that one might imagine such a thing could happen, but that seemed to be a very, I don't know, unique experience, that they would have gravitated toward each other and helped each other. And with the Hemingway, the emotions are in the writing are always kind of below the surface and unspoken, but right there, if you read carefully, which we all hope to do. And I wonder, even if she wasn't a literary person, but she could I believe he felt she understood him in some deep way because of that. And I'm sure that gave him some confidence, which he definitely needed to do what he was.
I think that's perfectly stated, Lynn. I think that she was just really nourishing to him at that stage.
Yeah. He was very self-conscious at the time and unsure of himself, and she gave him that boost that he needed.
Do you think she gave him the courage, not just the money, to be able to go to Paris and pursue this dream?
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. Well, as we know, as connected and as unique and special a bond as they did have around this time, about 100 years ago, a little bit earlier, they met Pauline Pfeiffer, and she enters the world of this couple as a friend, but she's very different from Hadley. She is stylish, she is modern, she's from money, she's also Catholic. What do you think drew Hemingway to her and to her world? Because he wasn't immediately impressed by her, right? He said
Yeah.
Ginny, her sister, was the pretty one.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it took a little while for Pauline to land with him. So can you just explore with me what drew Hemingway to Pauline and her world, and how did Pauline perhaps contrast for him with Hadley?
Well, Pauline and her crowd, which by then consisted of a lot of new people in their lives, the Murphys and the Fitzgeralds and the McLeishes, all who led an aspirational lifestyle that he really strived for and thought he deserved, and hoped that he would, soon be entering that lifestyle. And uh, Pauline and her sister Virginia were especially appealing to Hemingway because here he was at the lowest point financially that he had been. And Pauline and Virginia both had an Uncle Gus they both had a great trust fund from Uncle Gus, and they had income from the Pfeiffer Land Company, the Piggott Land Company. Um, And then Pauline had the added bonus of being an astute editor. She had graduated from the University of Missouri. She understood Hemingway's writing style. She was a journalist who wrote in short sentences, shunned adjectives, understood his tip of the iceberg style of writing. And so he appreciated all that. And I think probably also he appreciated the fact that she was a professional. She was a journalist and she was able to navigate in that crowd that he aspired to. So she was pretty much an intellectual equal, and I think that drew him to her. Even though at first he didn't think much of her and she didn't think much of him.
Yeah, I mean, Ruth, I was going to ask you if you could help us make the connection because I've never been able to make the leap from her initial reaction to him, which was revulsion. I remember there was this scene where she came over
Yeah,
to their apartment and she kind of glimpsed him slovenly sitting on
slovenly.
editing, and she was like, oh, and and meanwhile he has that famous line, I want to take her sister out wearing Pauline's amazing
Chipmunk coat. Yeah.
coat, and but somehow they occur to each other at something must have clicked
Yeah.
at some point where all of a sudden they're like, actually no, it's you, and
Yeah.
maybe
Well,
that.
I definitely think what clicked was his writing because, I mean, she was going to their apartment more and more to see Hadley. I mean, she had become friends with Hadley, even though she didn't think a lot of him. But the more she was there at their apartment and he was writing and asking her advice, and the more they got involved with his writing and editing, she began to see that, there was something there. And I think that there was a spark that drew them.
Lesley, you've written a lot of, about Pauline's journalistic writing. Do you see a connection between them as journalists?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, I think Ruth was spot on. I mean, they have the common language.
Mhm.
I mean, I think that Pauline's entrance into his life is astonishing in its timing. She
Yeah.
was almost like exactly what he needed
Yeah.
on so many levels in that moment, in terms of, leveling up. You don't need the comfort and the nourishment and the more maternal comfort that Hadley had provided. Like suddenly, he's not unconfident anymore as he was, as Ruth pointed out at the beginning. I mean, he's ready to take his place in a far more glamorous lifestyle set, a far more glamorous editorial space. I mean, and his ambitions, as we all know, were not little. I mean, they were to dominate from the very beginning. And so here is a woman who's a huge purse, or comparatively big purse, comes along, and then also the journalism is. As somebody who is a journalist who is married to a journalist, I mean, when you have that common language, it's your brains are running on the same current level, and it's irreplaceable unless you're replacing them with another journalist, which Hemingway did,
Yeah.
um, eventually. So I think that he was ready to level up, and Pauline was the level up in every way. And I don't mean that to sound uncharitable to Hadley, because what he had with her was extremely special, and his guilt about the abandonment was really acute and merited.
Mhm.
But we need what we need, and he realized that he needed Pauline in that moment, and they had that common language.
It's so interesting. I mean, I think so often when at least we heard a lot when we were making the film and thinking of just sort of exploring this part of Hemingway's life, that somehow Pauline is the temptress who comes in and, manipulates him into abandoning his wife and child. But whereas he sort of, and he sometimes portrayed himself as a victim somehow, a sort of helpless victim who just, this happened to him.
Yeah.
When clearly this is something this was his choice. He's the driving force, as Lesley was saying, of figuring out what he needs to do his art and to make his way in the world. And if you at some point recognize this is Pauline is what I need, then that's what I'm going to do, as opposed to this temptress coming in and somehow tricking him into,
Right.
leaving his wife. So I think it's important to kind of refocus, not the way he would tell it, but the way we look back and understand it. And
I
I
think
don't,
you're so right. I feel like it's so beneath him to have recast it that way also later
yeah,
on,
really.
you know? Just,
This,
I also wonder, once there's a baby and then Pauline is the mother. I mean, she maybe is sort of somewhat his mother, but now she's also actually a mother. And anyone who is a mother, at least I'll speak for myself, you do find yourself, your child needs you, and they become, they have to, in some ways, be the center. And Hemingway could never, that's not, he wasn't happy that she was pregnant in the first place. And I know he loved his children, but that I'm sure I would imagine played into the dynamic of just not wanting that kind of domestic life.
well, this is a really perfect time for me to do a couple of reminders and to do a poll. First of all, since we do webinars all the time, I neglected to remind you all that if you have questions, you can please put them in the Q&A. And I also forgot to mention that if you prefer to have closed captioning, that's available. You can hit that at the bottom of your screen. And last but not least, if you love something somebody's saying or you want to clap, feel free to use the reactions as well to indicate pleasure or displeasure as you will. But let's start with the first poll. And this, I feel as if we started to skew the audience on this one, everyone, but let's see how it goes. Okay, so it's the love triangle poll. Can everyone see that? Is that up for everyone? Okay, great. So it's a love triangle. With whom do you most empathize? Only one choice, please.
hey, why can't panelists vote on
I
this?
know.
I think we already voted.
Yeah, I was like, you guys already made
I think
your
we made
point. All right, so we'll just take another couple of minutes because we have a few more. I think we have more people than are voting, but we'll just give you another second or two if you're struggling to make up your mind. And I have to say, I'm not surprised that Hadley is there. 90% of people most empathize with Hadley. 8% with Ernie, and 2% with Pauline. Have to explore that a little bit more
Yeah.
later on. I'm sharing the results out with the audience now.
Wow.
Everyone can see that now?
Yeah.
The results? Okay, I'll stop sharing. And I was just going to say that I think the experience Hemingway had with Hadley, where first she lost the papers, the famous manuscript, and then that just a couple months later got pregnant, even though he really wasn't and made it clear he wasn't prepared to be a father. I can't help but wonder personally if he didn't think she was trying to sabotage his career at that point. I've always wondered if in the back of his mind he thought, ooh, those are two really big things to do, especially as we wind up in Toronto working at the newspaper for what turned out to be a shorter time than normal. Anyway, as we turn into the love triangle a little bit more, am I sharing anything? I'm not sharing anything. Lynn is going to be kind enough to share a clip from the 2021 PBS documentary Hemingway.
Okay.
And
Give
I'll
me a
ask the
minute.
panelists to turn off your sound and your video. All right, thank you so much. Very much. It's nice to see the film again. Thank you, Lynn. Yes. So now we're moving into the love triangle, and this clip actually alluded to affairs and relationships. So I wanted to ask you that Hemingway's affair with Pauline unfolded within the same social circles that included Hadley. How unusual or typical was that in the expatriate world of 1920s Paris? And of course, we got a sense everybody's having affairs, but what was the difference? What was the different feeling that maybe somebody like Hemingway and Hadley and Pauline brought to that dynamic? given their backgrounds.
I mean, I think one of the reasons why so many Americans have been flocking to the Paris during that period of time is they were escaping what they called puritanical America. And then, they get over to Paris and it's, no holds barred. All of a sudden, everybody behaves badly. And I think, maybe it would have been a little bit more unusual in Hemingway and Hadley's case. I mean, they're from stolid Midwestern backgrounds. And Pauline to a certain extent, but maybe, her socioeconomic class would have placed her in a slightly different moral or a category where that kind of behavior would have been slightly more tolerated. But I think, with in the case of Hemingway and Pauline, it was very intimate, deep attraction and mutual utility. But something that we're also not saying is that Hemingway was also romantically interested in Lady Duff Twiston and went a courting. And we don't know if that relationship was ever consummated. I personally believe it was not. I think he was just, in longing and in awe of the title and the androgynous glory of that woman who he immortalized. But I think, it seems to me that he was very felt like he had permission from the environment to act on his desires in a way that he might not have, like, let's say in Kansas City or Chicago.
Well, I think there were a lot of affairs going on, but I think really for the most, a lot of them were spectator sports, like the Duff Twisden, Pat Guthrie relationship. I think everybody enjoyed watching that. But the relationship between Ernest and Hadley and Pauline was pretty excruciating, I think, for all their friends, because not only was he having an affair, but he was dragging his mistress along with his wife to all of these events, and to have to sit through a bullfight or whatever with the three of them, or to spend the summer on the beach with them, that had to be excruciating for their friends, I think, even though they might have been used to extramarital affairs.
And do you think it was excruciating because the characters, the people were so, I guess, Midwestern America, so typically Protestant, that it felt like they didn't have the skin for it, or they were doing it, but they couldn't survive it? Is that something like what you mean?
Well, I think the problem with friends like the Murphys and the McLeishes and the Fitzgeralds is I think they all really, really liked Hadley,
Mm.
but they also felt that he had outgrown her and that she wasn't the right wife. And I think they felt badly because of that, because they felt like Pauline was the better match, yet they really, really liked Hadley. So it made it difficult.
Yeah, I mean, Ruth, that's 100%. I mean, we have evidence of that. We have
Yeah.
correspondence, between Hemingway and the Murphys and, both Sarah and Gerald, urging him to move on. And, Hadley is so she's so good
Mhm.
and devoted and, she's a loving mother, she's a loving wife. And, of course any decent person is going to feel excruciating is exactly the right word. It's a really difficult thing to encourage somebody to walk out on a woman like that, especially again, as Lynn pointed out, there's a child. But at the same time, the question really is like which duty is he going to honor? And which duty are they going to encourage him to honor? And it's clear that he felt he had a duty to take his place among that set and take his place in the literary pantheon. And he wasn't going to be able to do that with Hadley. And the friends, as excruciating as it was, we know that they all saw the Murphys, Fitzgerald. We know that they all saw potential in him to be something truly great. And so they're urging him to
Mhm.
honor his duty to his talent. And they're clearly encouraging him to make a very bloody sacrifice.
I wonder, and I'm not an expert on this, Lesley knows, and Ruth, you both know so much more about this than I do, but all the people we're discussing, their marriages are pretty complicated as well. So, right? So,
Truth.
the plain vanilla kind of, whatever, Midwestern marriage, whatever that would have meant back then, they've gone, as we said earlier, to Europe to escape these conventions to begin with, and are living somewhat less conventional lives with same-sex partners, their, official husband or wife, and people sort of navigating all these complexities that today would be, we have language for this, I mean, they had language for it, but a lot of things were unsaid about what was actually going on. And so I wonder at the time in their milieu, it's kind of, it would have been surprising to stay with your, for Hemingway and Hadley to stay together would have been surprising. There would have had to have been some kind of arrangement. Something would have had, I haven't really thought this through exactly, but I've just been thinking a lot, given the world we live in today, about polyamory and the way that we talk about, triangles or triads, or people have all different kinds of ways of being in the world that suit their needs in different ways at different times. And of course, they didn't have that framework that people sometimes speak about today. So I think it's maybe helpful to think they were kind of ahead of their time in some ways. Not if I would want, just to be clear, but
But and to be honest, even if we look at Hemingway's parents' relationship, we didn't have to go all the way to Paris to introduce complexity, did we? I think it was more the distinction between what your performative self and and the keeping up appearances, as they used to say, right? So we referred, or Lynn referred before, to Pauline as a temptress, and that Hadley was the good wife. I was just wondering, we know that's generally true, and we've all said versions of that here today. But what do those archetypical understandings of Hadley and Pauline may be obscure about each woman as a person? Is there more to know about either of them?
Okay, here's where I'd like to defend Pauline a little bit.
Okay.
Since you got 2%, right? Well, I mean, it's true. Pauline was nearing 30 when she met him, but she was really very naive and inexperienced with men, even at that age, because she had gone all 12 years of elementary and high school to an all-girls school. She had gone to the University of Missouri School of Journalism and graduated in 3 years because her roommate says that she never went out. She studied all the time. And then she went to New York to work for Vanity Fair and then Vogue under the watchful eye of her Uncle Gus and Aunt Louise, who chaperoned her. She started dating her first cousin, Matthew Harold, who was the lawyer for Uncle Gus's company, and they were engaged to be married. Um, Family was a little upset about that, not because they were first cousins, but because she was Catholic and he was Protestant. But at any rate, they were going to get married. And then she got this offer to just go temporarily to Paris, excuse me, to help set up the Vogue Bureau. And so she was planning on coming back and marrying Matthew. So when she started seeing Ernest, and he started flirting with her during their editing sessions or whatever, she didn't have the experience to rebuff his advances like a lot of women that he flirted with were able to do, because he flirted with everybody, but she took it seriously and she wound up falling madly in love with him. And if she had been looking to do that, if she had been manhunting as everybody portrays her, she wouldn't have looked for somebody who was uneducated and had a family and a child and was slovenly. uh, I mean, and he wasn't published yet. I mean, not in any way that he was really successful, other than the little boutique type publications. So the idea to me that she was a manhunter out to take him away from Hadley, I just think is totally wrong. My opinion.
I think you guys know where I stand, from the beginning on this, is, we need who we need. And, they fell in love. And even if they didn't, if it wasn't love in the way that, Hallmark describes love, it was like they found each other to be a match. And there's something inevitable about that. And what comes from denying that, it's just more misery and resentment in the marriage that you stay in. um I will say, Ruth, I mean, we do, a lot of their contemporaries do portray Pauline as, once she knew that she was in love with him, as being quite aggressive in terms of sealing the deal. And we have letters from her and to Ernest and Hadley saying, how are you guys? And I want everything that I want. And there's, some all cap stuff in there, and we all know what
Yeah,
it is
yeah,
exactly that she wants. I
yeah,
mean, so she's not a lamb in
Mhm.
this
yeah,
situation. I mean, and she's a shrewd fashion editor.
yeah,
This is not a patsy. Um, so I think, to her, I mean, yes, I agree. She's in love, and this is the man for her in that moment.
yeah,
And there's a lot of bloody inconvenience, and to go through. And I mean, it's a very hard earned marriage, isn't it? Eventually. So I think it's extremely complicated. I'm not without sympathy for her at all, but I do think, that she is shrewd, and she doesn't walk away, even knowing that there's going to be an extraordinary amount
yeah,
of pain to extract
yeah.
the prize.
And I would agree with that. Once she just fell madly in love with him, and head over heels, I just think she lost all reason when it came, to that relationship. I think she did a lot of things that just, she, not like she couldn't help herself, but she was blinded to a lot of things.
What about that 90% that went to Hadley? Is Hadley simply the good wife? How would we describe her role as the affair unfolded and her attitude once she demanded the 100 days of separation? Any thoughts about Hadley in this?
I mean, I was like, unfathomably understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah, true.
I mean, really
And
just so.
if I might say, she might have won the prize in the end.
Hmm.
Hemingway was not an easy person to be married to.
Hmm.
Yeah,
This initial romantic, he loved being in love, as we've all been talking about. So I'm not saying she recognized that at the time, but her life might have been truly miserable if she had stayed married to him the way
Lynn,
he treated
it's
all his
such a
wives.
good point, because she went on to have a very successful,
great
happy,
marriage. Yeah,
Point.
decades-long marriage. And
Yeah.
she got the happiness that and the security that she wholeheartedly deserved. So it's a
And
perfect.
all the rest of his wives, that's not what happened. So, I was just wondering, I don't know, Ruth and Leslie, how you think about this, but that Pauline clearly fell madly in love with him. And we know how charming and magnetic he was. We also know how incredibly self-centered he was and how everything had to be about him. And I'm sure he did, emit a charisma for, a relationship, but also I wonder if for Pauline, more so than Hadley, because of where he was in his life, she was also in love with the idea of this genius that's going to be famous and be a great writer, and in love with that sort of, not persona per se, but the possibility of what he could become, and would dedicate her life really to making that possible for him in a
yeah.
way that
Well, I
Hadley.
agree 100%. I agree because she basically could have been a very good writer herself. I mean, not in the in not writing books or novels or whatever, but she was a great magazine writer and editor. But she gave up her career thinking that she could shape him. I mean, in one letter she said, when we're married, I'm going to become your Svengali, because she really took him on, I think, as a project, and which is unfortunate because in the end, she lost him, and she also lost any recognition that she ever could have gotten as a writer in her own right.
I think one thing that's fascinating, Ruth, to your point earlier about how, when she first met him, he wasn't a big time writer at all. He was just, wildly desirous, as half of Paris was,
Right.
expatriate Paris was. So, I mean, in a way, it's a hell of a gamble, isn't it? To back him that way. And one of the things that was fascinating to me in researching this period is how all of these people surrounding him had such profound belief in his almost like destiny as a literary deity. And so for her to throw behind and to even just believe to really to be part of breaking up a marriage and to throw her entire family's fortune, what she had access to behind him. I mean, the leap of faith is really kind of staggering when you take a step back and think about how unproven he still was at that point.
Yeah.
I also wonder whether for her, and I do feel very sympathetic to her for many reasons, that on the one hand, she could make his life easy financially and every other way. And she just, pushed everything out of the way so he could be Ernest Hemingway and do his work. But he came to really resent that and feel like a kept man, and that he didn't have the independence, and that he was dependent on her, and he hated. So it ended up, what she could give him is actually ultimately what pushed him, or not pushed him away from her, but he felt he needed, he didn't want to be that. That dynamic was not what he wanted once he became more successful. So
it wasn't until it wasn't
for her, tremendous compassion. Pardon?
No, I say it was what all he wanted in the beginning, and then all of a sudden, like, just wakes up and realizes he despises her for it.
Right. Oh, so that's heartbreaking, honestly. Yeah.
It also occurs to me that in a weird way, Hadley's the most cosmopolitan, right? She's the one that says, okay, have your mistress. This doesn't have to break up our marriage, right? Marriage is something different than lust or desire. And she was willing to give him the space to explore that. It is Pauline and Hemingway who double down on the conventional relationship and the desire to draw or color in the lines.
Suzanne, that's so interesting. Because I mean, when you first asked the question about reevaluating Hadley, I always almost think of her as having like a Christian level of goodness. But the idea that it's actually cosmopolitan sophistication is really fascinating.
It's just, I always remember hearing something along the lines of some sentiment she had about, had he not grown up in the Midwest with its, narrow lawns and mines, he would have realized that you could fall in love with another woman and not get divorced, right? So that was possible. But now it's time for another poll. So audience members, prepare. Let me choose the right poll. Hang on. And okay, this one is on Hemingway's fiction. Can you guys see the poll? Is it visible?
Trainer.
Yes. Okay. So which is your favorite early career Hemingway effort? In Our Time, The Sun Also Rises, or A Farewell to Arms? Oh, this one's more of a hot race. I'm glad to see we're having at least some contentious bits here. Okay, we have about 10 people who have not yet voted. So another minute, not minute, another second. I'm going to close the poll in a second. All right, I'm ending the polling and I'll share the results. The sun also rises. That in a way surprises me. Anybody else? Everybody thought Sun Also Rises was going to win?
Wait, Suzanne, what did you think was going to win?
In Our Time.
Fascinating.
It's so groundbreaking. It's so fresh. It's so unlike anything else at its moment. I always say, and so digestible in the stories. I don't know. Did everybody think The Sun Also Rises was going to win other than me?
Yeah.
I had no
you look
idea.
Neutral. Did you think
Because I didn't see the 98% for or 90% for Pauline either, so I was just wait for the results to come in.
What about you, Ruth? Which one did you think was going to take it?
I thought probably The Sun Also Rises.
Okay.
although my favorite's obviously Farewell to Arms.
Okay. And how about you, Lynn? Which one did you think it was going to be?
Are you asking my opinion, which is my favorite, or which I think would win?
Both. Answer both questions, please.
I mean, it's very hard, just like picking your favorite child.
Yes.
I don't, but if I had to have my Desert Island Hemingway book, it would be A Farewell to Arms.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay. Did
I
you
love
think Sun was going
all
to be?
three. Those three are the ones I would take with me, but if I had to pick one, it would be that. And I think for that reason, for me, you know, I think we have to thank Pauline to some degree.
Well, that's the next question. So
Yeah.
we'll just jump right ahead to the way that art reflects life. So Pauline is often remembered as an editor and supporter of A Farewell to Arms. How instrumental was she in shaping Hemingway's professional trajectory during their years together?
Well, obviously, she was extremely instrumental, beginning back when she encouraged the publication of Torrents of Spring when nobody else liked it other than Fitzgerald. But she saw the humor in it, and I don't know, maybe she also recognized that maybe it was a way to get out of his contract. I don't know, but then all through their 100 days separation, he was sending her manuscripts back and forth, and she was editing and giving comments. This is too much out of the water. This is too much under the water, that kind of thing. And certainly all during their marriage, and even after they broke up, when he was working on For Whom the Bell Tolls, he said, "Well, I really wish Pauline would read this, but she hates me so much now that she's not going to read it. And that's a shame because she has the best judgment of them all." But I think not only did she work at shaping his work, but her family, I think, helped shape his work through their financial support. I mean, look at um, the trip to Africa that was financed by her Uncle Gus that produced things like Green Hills of Africa and Snows of Kilimanjaro and Short Happy Life of Francis Macomber. Um, and when he was working on Death in the Afternoon, even early in their marriage and relationship, um, Uncle Gus wrote to his representative in Spain and said, "Hey, buy up every book that was ever written about bullfighting and send it to Ernest Hemingway." I mean, they were all very supportive of him having the materials and the tools in order to write his stories. So I think the whole family was very instrumental.
Other thoughts
The
about
thing I will chime in on is I love the Short Happy Life. It's an incredible story. If my husband had written that, I mean, what a way to thank her. I mean, it's so cruel. So, I just it's really devastating to think about all the things that she and her family did for him. Um, and then I also will say I think some of the later works probably could have benefited a great deal from her help.
One likes to think that maybe she might have improved the sex scenes in For Whom the Bell Tolls.
Oh, that would have been good.
but he should have. Why they ever let that go live?
Well, he,
Well,
he suffered for not having her read it then.
Yeah.
so during this time, there's obviously a lot of emotional fallout from during the Hadley Pauline transition. Do you think that shapes his depiction of love, loss, and guilt in A Farewell to Arms and The Sun Also Rises in particular? Do you see elements of him grappling with his emotions there?
I would say, I want to know what you ladies think, but I would say probably not so much in Sun Also Rises in terms of the actual story, but where it does show up in Sun Also Rises is the book's dedicated to Hadley.
Mm-hmm.
And this just blew my mind when I was working on this. I mean, initially the book is dedicated to Hadley Richardson Hemingway, and then he goes in with his pencil and crosses out the Richardson Hemingway, just says to Hadley at the beginning now. and his son's name. I think the son, I have to go back and check, but I think in the published dedication, maybe um, Bumby had Hemingway at the end
Isn't
also.
it John Nicanor Hemingway? Doesn't he give him his proper name? I think
Yeah,
he,
I think he
yeah,
gets the last name, but Hadley doesn't. So
right.
it's almost like a subterranean yet public declaration about what's going down in the marriage, or announcement of the ending of the marriage, but it's also acknowledging the debt to her for supporting him through the book. And interestingly, in the earliest drafts where he's still Hem and everybody's still, not they're under their own names, Hadley is a character in some of the earliest draft material. And I mean, this was a book that was going to be unkind to everybody. And he took her out. So that was kind of a private kindness to Hadley also. So I would say that the way that it registers in Sun Also Rises are through omissions.
Well, there's that old
Right.
joke, right? If you were a Hemingway wife and you read the next novel and you didn't see yourself, you
Right.
were on the way out.
Well, and then I think in A Farewell to Arms, Catherine really is an amalgam of all three of the women that he had loved. He gives the World War I background and setting. He gives that to Agnes von Kurowski. Um, and even, she rejected him and he felt that loss. And then he gives Catherine's very nurturing personality. He gives that to Hadley, even though he had rejected her. And the childbirth and then the death really was all that was being written while Pauline was having their child and almost died in childbirth. And he, experienced a lot of guilt and sense of loss at concern about losing her. And this was kind of a scenario where he played out what would have happened if he lost her. So I think he was very much wrapped up in the character of Catherine. Was, he was really reflecting on love and loss and guilt related to all three of those women.
Great, thank you. Well, we only have a few more minutes left to chat because I want to turn to the Q&A. So I'm going to turn to a couple of final reflections here. And the first, I think, is an important one because this period of Hemingway's life is written about not just by Hemingway years later, of course, in A Movable Feast, but also in various fictional efforts, probably most notably Paula McLean's The Paris Wife. So I was just wondering if you wanted to speak to how subsequent narratives around this period maybe shape our understanding of it. Sorry.
I mean, I think with Movable, obviously we're going to treat it differently as scholars than people who are reading it in the general public, and people love that book. People seem to really love it, and they see it as a very romantic tribute. And whereas, us as scholars, we're looking at it and we see, fabrications and betrayals, and, attempts at rewriting history, but not without seeing what the public seems to see also. I mean, there are still aspects of that book that I love, and it evokes the period of time very fascinatingly and beguilingly. But it's revisionist history.
Mhm.
That I haven't read The Paris Wife, I admit, so I can't speak to that. But The Movable Feast, I remember loving it when I first read it for all the reasons Leslie's saying, the romance of Paris in the 20s, having read Sun Also Rises, and then reading Movable Feast, reading it again for our project. There are those romantic moments, but mostly it is extremely cruel to everybody who helped him, everybody. And, he wrote that book late in his life when he was really unwell mentally, and he didn't publish it. And so I don't know how much we can, and it was edited by Mary, and I don't know who else, I don't remember the details, but how much of a text we can really, what does this really represent, I guess? I think it's a really important question to think about. Is that him in his right mind reflecting on, this important moment in his life, or is it something else? I tend to think it might be
It's so interesting to think, though. I mean, Lynn, on that point, I mean, I can't, while you're talking, I'm trying to think of other works that are interpreted with such romanticism
Yeah.
but are at heart something else.
Mm.
I can't think of a comp.
No, I mean,
All right. Well, I told you I was going to do this. Maybe you prepared, maybe you didn't, but it's a fun thought experiment anyway. And if you don't have an answer, it's fine. And maybe we could have a competition in the society one day. But if you could title the Hemingway Hadley Pauline story as the novel that Hemingway didn't write, what would the title be?
I think you nailed it on the name of this webinar. I think that's what I would name
I'm
it.
always a class act, Ruth.
Yeah.
I would go and thumb through the Bible for references to Menage a Trois, see what could be rummaged up.
Well, that's one for everyone to think about. Final poll, and then we'll get to Q&A. So let me just get back, and here's the last poll today. This is, you get to do it over. If Bernie could go back, if he could have made that decision again later in life, do you think he would have remained with Hadley? I guess we disabused everybody of a romantic reading of A Movable Feast because everyone is saying he would not, even later in life. Later, Hemingway would still choose Pauline. We have a few more people who can vote. Just give you another couple of, we have a reliable about 15 of you who are not voting. So I'm going to close the poll in another second. Last moments to vote. Okay, sharing the results. Yes, everyone thinks that he would still make the same decision. He would not have stayed with Hadley. He would have gone with Pauline. And I guess that's good news for us, right? Because he becomes that larger than life figure that we all get to talk about and grapple with. All right, so I'm going to jump into the Q&A. Some of these are easier than others, but let's start with one that's pretty easy, which is, did Hemingway really give Hadley all the proceeds from The Sun Also Rises?
I think so, right, Lesley?
I think so.
Yes,
I-
as far
yeah,
as I know.
as far as I know.
Yes. And the other really, really easy one that I can take off the list is, what was that wonderful film that we got to see a clip of? That is a film that Lynn co-produced with Ken Burns. It's the Hemingway documentary from PBS. Okay, so those were the easier ones. Is anybody on the call familiar with Islands in the Stream? Another posthumously published Hemingway work, came out in the 70s.
Can you close the poll? I think we're
Oh,
so.
sorry, everyone. I was trying to look at the Q&A, and I still have the poll up?
Yes.
Oh, hang on. I was looking at the Q&A. That's why. Stop sharing. Thanks so much, Lynn.
Couldn't see you, so yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so
Um,
Islands in the Stream. Is anyone familiar with that work? Has anyone read it?
Very ish.
I hate to say this, but it's one of my favorite Hemingway works, even though it's deeply flawed. I say, even when Hemingway's flawed, he's flawed in much more interesting ways than most people, right? So the question is Pauline the basis for either of Thomas Hudson's wives in Islands in the Stream?
No idea.
I don't know. I remember reading that, but I don't really remember a whole lot about
Yeah, there's a
why.
devastating scene. Stopper your ears if you've not read it. But there
Spoiler
is,
alert for Hemingway.
yeah, spoiler alert. The book's been out for 60 years, 50 years. So his wife comes back, is a movie star, and she's visiting
Yeah.
Cuba, and they wind up having an afternoon tryst, sexual tryst. And their son, he knows that their son has died in an airplane accident during World War II. Has been shot down, and he doesn't tell her until after they have sex. It is when, and then he leaves her to go on submarines. It is one of the most devastating scenes. For my money, that could be a mixture of Hadley or Pauline, honestly. I don't know, unfortunately you can't talk back, so I don't know if anybody has stronger opinions on that, but Some people ask, do we know what happened to Ginny? I'm guessing Ruth might, the more desired sister initially. So what happened to Ginny?
Well, Jenny went to California with her good friend Laura Huxley. She wasn't Laura Huxley at the time. She was Laura Archera. She was a violinist. And they became both of them became very good friends of Aldous Huxley. And when Aldous' wife Maria died, Maria asked them to take care of him. And so um, Laura did her duty and married him, and it was really kind of a threesome. I mean, talk about unconventional relationships, but they all three lived together. And when Virginia died, I think it was in the 70s, she had her ashes scattered over the Mojave Desert, but she never married, and some people say that she told people that she never married because she never found anyone like her father, and others say because she never found anyone like Hemingway. So it's
Fun.
hard, it's strange. She was an interesting character.
Thanks, Ruth. Here's an interesting one. Hemingway had a bit of a penchant for older women, right? Agnes was older, and of course Hadley was older. Someone here,
Mhm.
Jack, is asking, do we think the age difference between Ernest and Hadley may have played a role in their breakup?
I mean, maybe a little bit. I think, Hadley became very swiftly very maternal after she had the baby. And I mean, really, had been older, obviously, and then but also seemed to significantly age after that. Like, just seemed to moved into a very different phase of life. But I would say that it was more about becoming a mother than the age difference. That was the determining change in the lifestyle.
Mhm.
But I mean, you guys might disagree.
That makes sense to me.
No, I agree. And I think it was also she was prepared to become a mother. It was something she was really ready for and embraced in a way that I don't think Hemingway did. So I agree with you that the tension around that level of being prepared mentally for that stage of life is something that puts stress between them. Here's a
But, that, but
really
as Ruth pointed out, also it was the same for Pauline because when Pauline was first met Hemingway, she too was nearing 30, and that was very an advanced age for somebody to marry and start having children in that time. And
yeah.
so for Hemingway, as Lynn was pointing out, when a baby comes onto the scene, that's the new center of the family. And for Hemingway to be quickly in both of those marriages supplanted as the center of attention, probably in part because both of the respective women had wanted to just get down to it, and start family life because they're older,
Right.
may have accelerated um,
Yeah.
events.
I think, oh,
But
go
but unlike Hadley, Pauline really did not have maternal instincts.
ahead.
And I mean, to me, the unfortunate thing about Pauline is that in the end, she lost everything
Mm,
because she lost Ernest and she really did love him and she never remarried. She lost the respect of her children because she put all her energies into Ernest and left the children with nannies while she went to Africa with him or um, and then of course she lost, the ability to be recognized in her own right as a writer. So the
mm,
maternal instincts just weren't there for Pauline.
mm. I always remember he was very proud of how quickly she became thin again after
Yeah.
the baby. That was like he wrote about a
And
lot.
she worked it.
She was, and she very fit, returned to a very fit state.
Right.
I remember reading that a couple of times and stuck with me as somebody who did not have that particular
Yeah.
experience postpartum.
Yeah, but
So,
that's really an appreciation of an instant effacing of pregnancy and motherhood.
yeah,
Never happened.
right. She's just back to what she was before. So here's an interesting question, and for those of us who like the Garden of Eden, it will resonate in many ways. Do we think there was sexual attraction between Hadley and Pauline, or perhaps even a relationship? And In other words, whatever sublimated there. And the Garden of Eden, does that have its roots in anything that we can identify in their relationship?
I want to hear what Ruth has to say about this. I was really trying to investigate that,
Yeah.
because they really were a menage a trois.
Yeah.
For, they were in each other's beds.
Yeah.
Sometimes
In bed
Pauline,
in their pajamas, and you've got to wonder about that. And I think Pauline had female relationships both before and after her marriage. Um, I think, she was very attracted to Clara Dunn, who was a college friend that she also roomed with in uh, New York. And then Jenny had a lesbian relationship with Clara. And then Ernest was concerned about Clara in a lot of letters and materials because he's afraid that Clara is going to convert Pauline. So, there's a lot. I mean, Ernest even mentions Clara Dunn in Green Hills of Africa when he says, I hate Clara Dunn. I mean, he doesn't mention people by name, but I think there was a relationship there. And after I published my book, I found a number of letters between the two of them that kind of leads me to believe that may have been true. But um, I don't know, maybe going to a Catholic girls' school where that was kind of the norm back in the
yeah, yeah.
20s. And then, of course, her sister had a number of female relationships. So I wouldn't doubt it if Hadley wasn't in there as well. But
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know of any
Hadley
evidence of it. But
yeah, I mean, Hadley is the sticking point there. I mean, it's like you can see it with Pauline, and we do know that they were really very intimately in each other's spaces, in Paris and south of France, and
right,
further afield. And I mean, for me, the interesting one is when they're all in quarantine. And then also when they're in Shroons, I can't remember. There's one really quite famous picture of the two of them, and they both have short
oh,
hair, and they're
right,
sitting outside the ski cottage. And
right,
I
right.
mean, Pauline just is materializing on all their holidays, whether medically, required or not. So it seems like there's something, but there's no hard evidence, unless, but so much of being a historian is, ultimately reading between the lines. I feel my feeling is that there were sentiments, but I would be surprised if there had been anything consummated between Pauline and Hadley.
It's kind of what I feel.
All right.
Lynn, no, different?
No idea. No, I have no idea.
Oh, come on, jump in there.
I think this same-sex attraction and androgyny are really important parts of these relationships. And it's very impossible to unpack, really, as you're saying. So
I'll just encourage, I'm sorry, Lynn.
yeah, no, go ahead.
I'll just encourage our guests to put any final questions in the chat. In one way or another, I think we've addressed most of the questions. I do see there is a question about Zelda and Hemingway's views on Zelda, and if we think it offers any window into his mindset at the time that he I think it means because he chose to end his life. So his reaction to her behavior or her mental illness, in especially in A Movable Feast, he's very ungenerous to Zelda and she to him though. In fairness.
Yeah, yeah.
Any thoughts on Zelda or any of the other? We also have a question about why was Hemingway so kind to Sylvia Beach? So, there's some characters in A Movable Feast who get skewered most, but then people like Sylvia Beach and Pound come across pretty positively. Any thoughts on Zelda or Sylvia Beach here?
I mean, Sylvia, it's kind of hard to impugn her. But then again, you could
Yeah.
probably say that about a lot of the people who, lent him very significant helping hands early on, and then were bitten in return. But she's like Hadley in a way. I mean, there's no I can't figure out what the point of contention would be, and so it's just these are the rare exceptions, aren't they?
Hmm. Well, that looks like it for our questions. I just want to know if any of you have any final thoughts or insights. Did anything here surprise you or change your mind? You know, we were going on this grand adventure to not just rehearse what we know, but to, potentially shift allegiances or get new insights. So, any final thoughts or things that you see a little differently now?
I'll just say that I think it is a really fun and sort of diverting almost parlor game to trying to figure out, who's who in this and what this happened in real life and how it's reflected in what he wrote. And well, I think it's amazing to me that 100 years after these works were written, his story still has that hold on people.
Mm.
But I think the farther we get from it, I guess I hope it's the work itself that, draws us in, because he did something very special, transmogrifying these people that he knew and that he was so close to, most of whom he betrayed in one way or another, into these timeless characters. And I'm always fascinated by, Lesley goes into this a lot in her wonderful book about, sorry, my brain is, I'm a little tired, but the person who was the model for Cone.
Oh, Harold Loeb.
Harold Loeb.
Harold Loeb.
Yeah.
Who was, horrified at how he was portrayed, but also, right, grateful to be immortalized.
Mhm.
I think that's a really fascinating question.
Yeah.
I think probably for Pauline and Hadley too. They touched the sun, they got close to, immortality by their relationship with Hemingway. And I don't know, I think it's interesting to think about what people will be saying 100 years from now about all this.
I've just been so astonished by how, as we were saying before we started, how relevant all of it seems still. And also, as we were preparing for this session, I was thinking about how astonished Pauline and Hadley would be to just be discussed in this format 100 years later by strangers who know, that they were in bed with each other. How?
Burn your letters. Burn your letters. Not your Hemingway letters. Send those to the Letters Project. But so, yeah, I want to thank everybody. I have a couple of quick announcements before I say goodbye to everybody. So I hope you'll stay to hear just two or three. First of all, right after today's meeting, for those of you who are members of the Hemingway Society at around 8:30, you should have received a meeting link if you registered to attend the business meeting. This is our annual business meeting. It's usually about an hour. We just report out on our activities and just love to share with members what we're up to. So please join us there if you are registered for that. And that's in about 15 minutes. But it is a different link. Remember to go to your meeting link. The other thing I'd like to share, and for those of you not used to the Hemingway Society world, you may not know that we do this, but we do. We have a Holidays with Hemingway virtual party. It's a COVID pivot adaptation that just loves to stay, wants to stay. People want it back. It always is very well registered. So we have music, bells, games, overview of Hemingway's life 100 years ago, Christmas, lots of fun things like we always do. And of course, our signature cocktail. So look forward to more emails, detailing what's going to happen at the party. But please join us if you can. It's Thursday, December 18th, 7 p.m. I'm very proud of these parties and I always enjoy myself completely, but I do have to tell you, everyone in my life makes fun of me for them, but I think they're wonderful. And just another reminder, I hope you didn't go. Yes, we have a conference coming up in Toronto this summer, July 20th to the 25th. We are going to be up in Toronto for the Hemingway in Toronto sorry, wrong genre, conference. And you can still submit a paper for consideration. The deadline is November 30th. And for those of you who are coming to the business meeting, you will learn more there as well. And so at this point, I just want to say thank you to our panelists this evening for your insight, your warmth, your humor, your patience with some of my zany questions. I think you really helped us explore one of the most human and most complicated chapters in Hemingway's life. And you helped us continue to see both him, his work, and the people that he loved and needed, as Lesley said, with human empathy and insight. So thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure to see
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah, thank you, Lesley.
Very honored to
It's
be
good
on the
meet you
panel.
guys.
I had
Great
some
people.
time.
This was wonderful. Thank you guys. I couldn't have enjoyed it more.
Enjoyed it.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Bye.